Welcome to the My House podcast, a show about the past, present, and future goings-on at the My House Youth Drop-In Center in Wasilla, Alaska, with your host, Michelle Overstreet.
Hi, welcome to episode 18 of the My House podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Overstreet, and today I'm joined by Julia Luey from the VOA, Volunteers of America Youth Program in Eagle River. Thank you for joining us. We're so happy that you're here. Before we get into our discussion, let's break to Isaac for a quick housekeeping update.
So Rotary Uncorked is over, and I hear that it went very, very well. It sounded like so much fun. I was so sad that I wasn't there in person for this one, but you were, Michelle. How was Rotary Uncorked?
Oh, it was amazing. We talked about you several times, Isaac, because there were so many things that you would have loved to have been there for. The food was great. The auction items were exciting and fun, and the guests were, it seemed like everybody was having a great time, and
awesome.
It's really enjoying it. Yeah, it's a really enjoyable event. One of the things I like the most about it is that people can visit. You can visit. It's not everyone's sitting at their table being entertained. It's really interactive, which is so much fun. So next year, Isaac.
Next year. Well, the next big event that we have coming up is Radiothon. It's going to be on November 4th in partnership with Ohana Media. We're going to be on the radio broadcasting out of this studio all day from 6 in the morning to 6 in the evening. We're going to have tons of guests coming on from our staff and some clients and some community partners. So it'll be a fun time. Make sure you're tuning in on 99.7 out here in the Valley. Pay attention because we're going to be giving away some prizes, and there's going to be lots of opportunities to interact and call in and chat with us here. So that's really exciting. That's our next big project that we have coming on as an organization. Podcast-wise, let's see, Diagnonsense. Still kicking, still doing stuff, making stuff happen. Redemption is back. Redemption is back though, and they just had their first episode of season 2 come out, which was good. We have a guest coming on, our first guest of season 2. That'll be releasing next Friday, and My Voice will be back this Friday too as well. So
good.
Yeah,
good.
My Voice season 2 coming back, and I'm super excited about that. So
good. Very good. Thank you, Isaac. Julia, thank you for being with us. And
thank you for the invite. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about the work that you do is that there are very few organizations across the state of Alaska that are serving youth in the way that you do. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Volunteers of America, Alaska. We're not volunteers, surprise. Our name is not so forgiving. We started here in Alaska about 40 years ago in our residential program in Eagle River. And so that's known as ARCH still to this day. And that stands for the Adolescent Residential Center for Help. And so you're right, it serves youth ages 12 to 18 who are struggling with co-occurring substance misuse and mental health challenges, which there are very few resources here in Alaska for. We also have a robust outpatient and community-based program in Anchorage, and we also, within the last couple of years, have really evolved our school-based mental health program as well. And so pretty soon, we've been in 7 schools. We're just about to expand 3 more elementary schools. So we'll be in a total of 10, and really just kind of that continuum, trying to move upstream and really trying to be a support to the entire school and provide those needed interventions to youth. We also do a lot of work around supportive housing, transition-aged youth, and really utilizing an approach of just meeting them where they are and helping navigate where they want to go. But our core is our residential program, and that has really created just such a beautiful culture of what it is we're trying to build and support youth here in Alaska.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. I love that youth-centered philosophy. I think that's so powerful. And they feel that when they're with you, they know that they are the purpose for the program. And,
Absolutely.
We talk about other programs that are outside service providers or ancillary providers, and it's sometimes really challenging to have that spirit extend out, and how do we build that in partnership, right?
Absolutely. I think when I, first came into the youth world, I think what shook me was how authoritative the model was. And I wanted to yell from the rooftops, we're not McLaughlin. Like, we're literally not McLaughlin. This is not the role in our lives. And, I think in any field, in any circumstance, when you don't have the right resources or the right support, it can be very easy to kind of go with what's comfortable and what's known. And that's really kind of what we were talking about earlier, just kind of that control mechanism. So yeah, absolutely. It's definitely been a transformation within our philosophy of care that we've really held true in these last couple of years, especially. VOA has gone through quite a transformation over the last 5 years, and it's just incredible to be a part of and to just bear witness to the beauty that happens in these kids' lives. It's quite awesome.
Nice. I really love that. The idea of giving youth choices,
Absolutely.
helping them to feel empowered, the idea that they feel controlled in an environment just makes them want to rebel. And so the less we do of that, the more we really empower them by default. And so I really love that aspect. And I think that when they get through your program, they always feel that connection. They, that's where you get the kids that come back and say, hey, I just wanted you to know I'm doing really good.
Absolutely. We always want to be home to them. In anything that we're doing, we want to create a sense of community and a sense of belonging so that they always know they have a seat at our table. I think something that's interesting too in the youth world is kind of that dynamic that you have in serving the parents too. And sometimes they have a different goal in mind when a parent or a legal guardian is bringing their kiddo to services. And so it's, I think historically has definitely been kind of by what the parent wants, and that parent and therapist are really helping drive that train. And while they're absolutely a valuable part of the journey, it's the conversations that we're having with the youth of what goals are most meaningful to them, that we can support them along the way. And is it the goal that we have in mind for them that we would really love to see them achieve? Sometimes it's not. Yeah. But it's really about those seeds that we're planting and watering during that journey with them. And sometimes they don't see those goals through to their own standards. But all along the way, they're creating connections and they're creating hope and making vast improvements in what might be their own standards.
And growing that belief that I deserve.
Absolutely.
That dreams do come true. It's okay to dream. It's okay to ask for what I want, not just what I need. It's okay to say I don't accept abuse. I don't accept people that don't treat me in a way that is up to my standards. And
Absolutely.
then the flip side of that is helping build that self-esteem so that they believe they're worthy and they're worth more than how they might see themselves.
Yeah.
And I really love what you're saying around that, because I think that's the key to really helping kids reach and be successful. Just one person that believes in them, two people that really believe in them.
Well, we know with the ACEs data, I mean, just one positive role model and adult support can change the trajectory of a young person's life immensely. Why aren't we pouring enough resources and supports to really build up those natural supports in our community for our kids? Yes.
I would add to that, we had a team of master's level psychologists that we sent to Atlanta, Georgia, to the most the top shelf, most intensive family reunification mediation training in the nation. They're qualified to testify as expert witnesses. They were there for a week just doing this intense training. The guy that came back said, I'm never going to another training that you send me to again. We go to trainings usually and we sit on the beach and, we spend 2 or 3 hours training. He goes, this was brutal. It was like 9 hours a day plus study time. And so we were really excited about that. And they came back to work with us. And I think it was about 18 months after that, we had referrals for, we could offer this, right? We got this mediation team that we can offer to your family and with a focus on reunification. And we actually thought that would reduce our need for housing, transitional housing, because we would help kids go home.
Right.
And in that first 18 months, we had 21 out of 22 families that we offered that to, the parents declined. And we ended up not having the kids in the room when we called the parents to offer them the mediation training. We started out, we would have the kids in the room and we would say, this is what we've got this to offer. It doesn't cost you anything. We'll pay for it.
Yeah.
And it was so brutal for the kids to have parents that basically said, we're not interested. Yeah. We don't really want to reunify our family. A lot of times it was step parents that didn't really want the child there in the first place. It was brutal.
Yeah.
And we hardly ever use that service anymore. And we really had to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the kids that we're serving have families that don't care for them the way that my staff and this community does. As a community as a whole is very, very caring.
Yeah.
But I think we have to deal with the fact as Alaskans that there are people that just don't want to do teenagers.
Yeah. You're speaking to my soul. I think in any textbook and literature and evidence-based practice and, all these really fancy words is really going to point to if you aren't supporting the entire family, like wraparound care, family services, that's so important and something that we do at VOA Alaska very, very well. But the harsh reality is that there are so many of our kids whose families are not capable of being involved. When back in 2019, I could feel how many kids we were losing from our residential program down to our outpatient program, and it felt like I was being notified of either a suicide or an overdose or something, way more than I had ever experienced being in the adult sector. And that's not why I got into the youth sector. Like, I'm trying to really change the tide here and do something, and it's like we're losing one. It feels like every week. What are we doing? And so I printed out a discharge roster from our EHR, and I went to our different program staff and what happened with this kid? What happened with this kid? What happened with this kid? And 30% of the kids who successfully completed our residential program either relapsed or returned to active use due to the lack of support in their home living environment. And so that has to wake us up as a community, as a state, and say, what in the world are we doing with these kids? Right. There's a mental health crisis here in Alaska. Dr. Murthy advised it back in December of 2021, and it's here in Alaska live and well. I'm sure you're seeing it on your doorsteps. We're seeing it in ours. And so, one of the pieces that we've implemented in our organization to really combat that transition between the residential to outpatient is a day treatment program. And so this is an ASAM. ASAM stands for American Society of Addiction Medicine. It's basically kind of the field Bible and, different level of care placements given kind of the severity of an individual's substance use and mental health challenges. And they're there from about 8:30 in the morning till about 7 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday. We started with 3 kids, and our program director kept it steady around 6-7 kids. Nice. And now we've been able to increase that to about 10-12 kids. But we're still losing them. We have really good intentions, and I think a lot of different providers and organizations such as My House doing really, really good work. But I'm really hopeful that there will be some type of statewide system response to how we're really looking at the behavioral health system of care and how it catches and retains kids who don't have those natural supports at home. Right. Sorry, long-winded way of saying you're speaking my language.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and we had a really interesting conversation just a week or so ago about her experience. And she had some friends that she's at a new school this year, and we had a friend that she had a group of friends she was sitting with, and they were saying, well, what's your diagnosis? And she said, oh, I don't have one. And they said, oh yeah, you're probably ADD. And she said, but I'm not. I'm not ADD. I'm 17. I'm not ADD. And they were like, well, don't you get depressed sometimes? I mean, you get depressed, right? And they went through this whole list of things. And she came home and said, it was so weird. It was like if I didn't have a diagnosis, I didn't fit into a box that was pre-existing.
Yeah.
And we had this great conversation about the culture around behavioral health and disabilities, and the idea that you might experience something that is an outcome of a trauma, but that you don't have to carry that around for the rest of your life.
Right.
That we all have things that we experience as trauma, and then you work through those. You feel it and you let it go, and you find coping tools and people that your support people, and places that you go to plug into additional support when you need it, and just acknowledging and recognizing that we heal, we recover. And I think that's a stigma that is part of that behavioral health addiction perception in Alaska that we really have to work to overcome, that people do recover.
Oh, absolutely.
People do heal. And when you take that 30% of the youth going back to those homes where there's high risk activity going on, they don't see that. They don't see the healing. Right. They don't get the belief in their soul that people really do recover and can go on to be peer support and work in the field or not work in the field, but do whatever their dream is, doing it clean and sober, or doing it in a state of mind that is healthy. Yeah. And I think we need more advocates, more people that have healed and that are in recovery saying, yes, we do recover. Yes, we do heal. And creating a culture of healing rather than a culture of trauma and stigma. And I think we're in that transition right now, but we've got some work to do.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment, especially because I think where we're at in the evolution is this next generation that's coming up. They're pretty comfortable talking about mental health.
Yes.
And talking about addiction and really getting to that vulnerable space about whatever trauma that they've experienced and, what that means for them and how they want to correct that moving forward. But there's also just this unspoken population that's just not being talked about, that isn't in front of us, that isn't visible, and we're losing them. I mean, recent data that just came out recently was in 2021, the sharpest increase in attempted suicide was between the ages of 11 and 14.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's happening younger and younger and younger. And so, while there's this great hope that we're making so much good progress in the evolution of how we talk about mental health, how we talk about healing, how we talk about recovery, and really embracing those communities and the people who are part of those communities, we need to move younger.
I think just recently we had a very young person, maybe in the last year, who was 11, 10 or 11. And I think there are two parts to that. I think sometimes communities we're pretty active. Justin Pendergrass has created such he's amazing, such an education platform for teaching people what to look for and what to do and how to talk about it. And it's the opposite of addiction and suicide is connection.
Absolutely.
And making those connections. But I think that people think that's for a certain demographic or a certain age group, and it can happen to anyone. What was interesting for me about some of that data was that one of the second highest groups was men over the age of 75 that were high risk for suicide. And I was like, wow, the oldest and the youngest. How sad is that, you know? And I think we forget. We get complacent, or we think we know where the risk is, and then and we don't think about the older and the younger. Instead of including everyone, we're focusing on
whole health, whole people.
Yes, whole people. Yeah. And so I think that's part of it, but I also think there's a piece of it in the that's anchored in a denial of those symptoms can't apply because it's too close. They're too young. They're too fragile.
Right.
And the fact that they're young and fragile is sometimes a reason to look there. And
it's scary.
It's scary. Ask the questions, right?
Ask the questions.
Justin's always just ask the question. It's hard.
Yeah, it's not going to put the idea in their mind.
Yes.
Just ask the question.
Ask the question. Yeah. What do they know about it? What have they been thinking? I think the isolation of COVID really contributed to a lot of that. They lost their social base when they were staying home from school. And, a lot of change happens for a kid between the ages of 12 and 14. And for kids who are out of school and at home during that time, it was lonely.
Absolutely. No, so for so many, they went from elementary school straight to either middle school or high school.
Yes.
That transition period was just completely lost. And we saw the mental health needs, the last Wire BS data, right, from 2019, I think. We were seeing concerns rise and rise and rise, and then COVID hit, and everybody's like, ugh, we know it's coming.
Yes.
And so we're definitely starting to see some data emerge. What I really appreciated during that time, though, was Dr. Murthy's recommendations that he listed out in his advisory. And he came to the summit a couple years ago, and I just fangirl, he's just amazing.
It's practical. It's always so practical.
And it makes sense, and it's not a hard lift, really creating systems of care, collaborative efforts, partnerships, and really being, I think, more centered on the philosophy of care that we started off talking about, is really where I think a lot of hope exists for what we're all doing to support Alaska's youth.
Yeah, I think so too. That the encouragement around community communication, and then there was a third thing. There's community communication, and
he called for some research to start being conducted on social media, which I'm interested to hear more about. I mean, that's the one unregulated body, I don't know what you want to call it,
industry
that kids have immediate access to. I'm curious to hear what that looks like down the road.
I would love to look at that as well, and Stacy has really done a little dive into that because of the relationship between the porn industry and human trafficking.
Oh, okay.
Just last week there was a 24-year-old in Indonesia, Bangladesh, Indonesia, arrested because of reports made by a little girl in Alaska.
Wow.
And she was groomed on Snapchat and ended up sharing pictures that were child porn, and then leveraged into more pictures, and finally told her parents what was happening. And he threatened her that if she didn't do what he was asking, that he would send those pictures, the first round of pictures, to all of her friends, and he did that.
Wow.
And so he was for real. She knew that he would do it if he threatened, and finally told her parents. And because of that report, I think he ended up with 34 charges from around the world, and was arrested in Bangladesh. And he was doing that all with social media and Snapchat. And so I shared that on our Facebook page, and another social media outlet. I recognize the irony of that.
We're all looking at it. We're all looking at it.
But I shared that, and I really was hoping that people would get that it isn't just community as in our community.
Right.
It's the worldwide social community of protective factors, discernment, and really fiercely protecting those who are the most vulnerable, and finding ways of helping them to manage their choices,
right?
Maturity, recovery, if that's the case, and become part of the solution. That little girl is going to always feel like she's part of the solution. That's awesome. Because she was empowered to do that by law enforcement. But wouldn't it be great if we had more of those kinds of stories? Because we hear so many of the other kinds of cyberbullying and the chat rooms that are so unhealthy. And I'm I'm with you. I'm excited to see what some of the data shows, but also how do we overcome that?
Yeah.
What are tools that families and parents and communities can use to help them really discern this is not someone I should engage with. I should not be on this page.
Right. How to make it as healthy and useful as possible. I am not old by any means, but I didn't grow up with social media, and so it's even wild to me. Like my 13-year-old, I swore I wasn't going to be that mom that's like, well, back in my day, and I totally am. And it scares me a little bit, but, a conversation that we had with a group of students from West High School really shifted my soul professionally and personally in my journey being a mom. And, we were a bunch of adults sitting around the table like, what are youth going through? What are youth going through? I'm like, they just went back to school. Let's go talk to them. Like, let's actually go and talk to the kids and hear from them what exactly they're going through. And it was one of the most beautiful conversations that I've been able to participate in. And what they talked about when they shared about the importance of social media is that it is a method of connection for them. Mm-hmm. And how they share their fears, how they share their joy, how they just connect with other people just looks different now than it did when we were growing up. And instead of thinking that's wrong, because it was different than what I had experienced growing up, So not that I was saying that it was wrong, but I just didn't know. I just don't know what that looks like. And so when you don't know anything, again, you just kind of want to control it. And so it really shifted my perspective and really, social media are outlets for connection. And so how do you really create routines and structure that really massages that connection in a way that's helps one's well-being instead of, really trying to hurt it? I've got a 13-year-old daughter who's got Instagram, and it's scary, right. And it just takes some really open, transparent conversations where we as the adult, we don't always have the answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's powerful. That just being able to say that to a young person that we don't always know, but maybe we can just walk through it together.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of energy in that's cohesive and that creates those connections. And as youth providers, I think what you're describing is just a pathway forward and having the conversations and making those connections so that we don't have to have all the answers. Right. We just have to have the conversations.
Yeah.
And, as a master's level therapist, one of the most fascinating things to me has been, you study different theories and different theorists, and it's all interesting.
Yeah.
But one of the most interesting things to me has been something that I think Carl Jung was kind of famous for, but people talk about if you just let someone talk for long enough, they hear themselves and can see where they need to go. They can hear where they need to go. You just have to let them talk.
Yeah.
And I think about that often. When you have teenagers, you just need to let them talk and be with them on that conversation. And a lot of times they'll come to a conclusion or ask for input
right.
that they experience much differently than they do if we're, again, pushing that punitive, I know better than you do what you need. And I find that so grating.
Yeah.
I'm challenged to work in partnership with some of those organizations because it feels like it borders on abuse intrinsically when you take away someone's rights and the idea that we can take away parents' rights, and then as a function of that, the child loses some choices as well. And how do we empower them then? What does that look like?
Yeah.
How do we help them to feel like they're connected when we're disconnecting? And I think that's for youth serving organizations. And I think we have that in common. I think we're always trying to figure out how to do that better.
Right.
But I think as youth serving organizations, that's a real linchpin is how do we do that better?
Right. I think sometimes it can be a little freeing for us too, as youth providers, because we get to say, oh, no, we're not that system. We have no interest in molding you into something that, this system is saying is going to be the most successful.
Right.
So I think we're a little lucky in that regard.
I agree with you. I have to hold space for that sometimes because it's not always popular.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's not. But when you receive the phone calls from parents and loved ones and kids themselves who've been through your program and have had their souls and lives changed by a simple conversation or some sort of help, whatever that is, it makes it all worth it. And I think in any case, what are we all looking for? We're all looking for love. We're all looking to belong somewhere. And, if we can start with that community first and building that for kids, we're doing something right.
Yeah, agreed. I'm excited to do that with you. We won't say too much about it because we're still in the very early days, but we're excited about working on a partnership together. And we'll have more information about that as time goes on. But thank you for being with us, and thank you for the work that you do in that very narrow field where you're a lot of the time the only provider. And thanks for filling that gap. It's important, and we're grateful.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you, Michelle, for being you, because you are such a role model and have really helped pave the path forward for what this looks like, not just for youth services, but services overall. So I really thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll look forward to coming back again when we have bigger news.
Absolutely.
That's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank Julia for being here. The My House podcast is recorded at the My House studio in Westella, Alaska. Our producer and editor is Isaac Smolden. I'm Michelle Overstreet. Until next time.